All right, here we go. All right, welcome back to, pause. Let's start. Welcome back to Contacts. We are joined today by Dr. Mike Herbert, Athletic Director at Southwestern Oregon Community College and founder of Supporting Student Athletes. Coach, really excited to have you. Just spent a long time reminiscing about the past, but let's get on the pod and talk shop here a little bit.
Great. Thanks for having me, Justin. This is great. I appreciate all the reminiscing is awesome too. But I appreciate the time to talk to you today.
Absolutely. So why don't you help us understand how you ended up where you are? Take us through your background in athletics as a coach. How did you end up coaching, and what was the process for you landing where you are now?
Yeah. Well, I graduated from San Benito High School in Hollister, California, and I think I'm probably one of the rare people who kind of knew what they wanted to do early on. I actually even coached when I was a senior in high school. It was my first coaching job. Coach Becerra got Dave Kaplansky and I jobs coaching 2 youth basketball teams. And so I just knew that's what I wanted to do. So went to Sonoma State, got a bachelor's degree, wanted to teach, decided while I was there, I don't know if I want to do K-12, maybe I'll do college coaching. So I ended up at Humboldt State, got my master's degree. I enjoyed the 2 years there as a grad assistant, but then I also saw a taste of the college life, and I coached in between there. I coached 1 year at a junior college, at Gavilan Junior College. And I thought, well, maybe college coaching isn't what I want to do. Maybe I want to teach. Every day I'm sitting there doing film exchange stuff, and the professors are leaving at 2 o'clock. They're going fly fishing and they're enjoying themselves. And so I ended up at New Mexico, University of New Mexico, worked on my PhD in curriculum and instruction. I had a minor in educational psychology. I loved it. I really enjoyed the teaching side of it, but I did miss the coaching. So I coached high school basketball here and there all the way through. Ended up in Texas for a year with my wife. Didn't really find jobs that we liked. And my wife is actually a very successful softball coach. She got the job here at Southwestern 14 years ago to coach the softball team, and I came with her. She left Humboldt for me to come to New Mexico. I returned it and came here with her, and it's all just kind of worked out. I coached women's basketball here for 7 years, and our athletic director, who was here for 38 years, he retired 9 years ago, and I got this job, and now I just love doing what I'm doing. I stopped coaching 5 years ago because we've got young kids now who are, 5th grade and freshmen, and it's really hard to have 2 college coaches in the house. My wife's a lot better at it than I ever was, so I said, hey, I'm gonna stop doing what I'm doing and just focus on admin, and we've kind of built a life here in Coos Bay. It's been great.
Awesome. I know when we talked a couple weeks ago, we were checking in about Prefontaine and the legend that is him in Coos Bay, and how I made a side trip there one time just to say I'd been there. But moving there was probably a little bit of a culture adjustment, which we can get into. But I bring that up from the standpoint of when you take a new job, when you achieve that place, whatever it be, assistant, head coach, athletic director in your case, if you could take me through revisionist history, of course, here, but what did you realize as a head coach that you needed to figure out when you took over that you realized very quickly you didn't know? And when you became the AD, following in the footsteps of someone that had been there for 38 years, what did you quickly realize you needed to figure out?
Well, on the coaching side, for me, I think the biggest thing was trying to build a culture where people wanted to be here. It took over a program that had 2 or 3 coaches in about 2 or 3 years, and one coach that was here just for 1 year. So I came in just trying to find people who wanted to be part of something and wanted to have fun doing it. And I think when you're starting to recruit, you're never going to win right away, usually in 1 year. But if you can start to build a culture where people want to be there, and that worked out because I was the men's assistant 1 year, and then I got the women's job the next year. So the men's players, I think, also helped me because they told some of the women's players, hey, this is a good guy. He knows what he's doing. He's going to treat you right. It's going to be a good environment. So that made it a little bit easier to start recruiting because if your athletes in your program aren't positive, they're going to talk to your recruits. They're going to know right away that it isn't a positive environment. So I had to figure out how to build that before I could find the good players. Because we went to the tournament 3 times in 7 years, and those 3 times we had really good players. I wasn't a better coach in those 3 years. We had really good players, and I had good players all along and great people all along. But for me, really starting a new program was just trying to create a positive environment where people want to be here and they want to be a part of what you're doing. That's probably the number one thing, because you're always going to fight the win-loss. Well, did you win last year? I want to go somewhere they're going to win. It's like, well, no, we didn't win last year because I'm building this thing. So just trying to sell myself and let people know, who I was and that they were going to get treated right. I think that empathy and that caring about people is really important, which ties into the AD, taking over as AD. I have the advantage that I got named to be AD 3 months before our AD retired. So I got to spend time with him. Now he's still here locally. I still can call him. He'll answer his phone and we can talk. But really, I thought I was an okay head coach, but I always knew that I was a better assistant coach. And really, even as AD, that's really my role. I'm everyone's assistant coach. Yeah, I have to say no sometimes, and we have to make decisions, but really my job is to let them know I care about them and I'm going to support them with whatever that means. If that means helping them set up the scoreboard, helping them find money, helping them with a recruit, whatever it is, my job is really support. And I talk to our admin assistant, our equipment manager, our trainers about this all the time. I go, look, nobody knows what we do. Nobody really cares what we do until we do it wrong. Till we do something wrong, then we're going to hear about it. So really, we have a very thankless job, which is fine. My coaches know that I'm there for them, and they know I care about them. And I know they care about me, and that's really all I'm worried about. I'm not worried about the public. I'm not worried about anybody else, the praise or anything like that. I just want everyone to know that I'm going to do whatever I can to help them out. And I think that's really been the learning curve, because I was a coach for 4 years, a full-time faculty member. And then I became AD. So I turned around and I became the supervisor to a bunch of peers,
right?
Some of which had been here for a lot longer than me. So that, for me, that's been the learning curve from coaching to administration, is continue to have that connection, that friendly connection, even friendships. Like I have friendships in this department, but we also know that sometimes I do have to say no, but it's just trying to establish that caring relationship with people around you is so important.
Well, I love the awareness that I was a better assistant than I was a head coach. And in my role as the athletic director, the analogy of you are everyone's assistant is really powerful. And it's not something that I've thought about as the AD myself until you said it. And then as I'm processing, it's like, yeah, you know what, that's what you do. What can I do to make your job easier? What can I do to support your mission? How can I put the weight of the office behind what you're trying to accomplish? And it's a really good point. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
As you transitioned into the athletic director role, as you had been at other stops, I'm always curious if there are things that you've brought with you everywhere you go. And what is the best thing that you do culturally that ripples throughout your program, either as the basketball coach or as the athletic director or as the assistant, or something maybe your wife does in the softball program? But I'm always curious, what are those things that you can offer that have really had transformational impact?
Well, it's funny because you've coached long enough to know, like, all coaches are thieves, right? We steal stuff all the time. I used to love playing against somebody, watching film, and then running the exact same play the next time we played them in the conference, running their play against them, and even calling it, their team name or something. That's all we do. We're not making new stuff up. We're stealing stuff all the time. So everything I've ever done has been a combination of Coach Becerra at Hollister High, Pat Kennedy at Santa Rosa High School, Rich Shea, it's Tom Wood, Steve Kinder, all these guys, even the names that I won't mention of the ones that weren't great experiences, you still learn even from the bad experiences, right? You learn what not to do. And really, Pat Kennedy at Santa Rosa, I worked for him for 3 years, and he taught me that if you've got a roster of 12 or 15 people, it's so much easier for you as a head coach to adapt to 12 people than it is to ask 12 people to adapt to you. Because I asked him, I said, well, what are we going to run offensively? He says, I don't know yet. Well, what do you mean? He's like, I got to see what we can do. And I said, well, I'm a coach JV. What should I run for you? He said, run whatever you want. Run what works for your guys. Here's a list of 12 things, terminology I want them to know. But if you have, 12 guys on the JV team that are all 5'2", and I've got 6 foot and above on the varsity team, he goes, you're not going to run the same stuff as me. You have to run what works for you. And that to me really set the groundwork, I think, for being able to try and look at things from other people's perspectives. And that's even the AD here, John Spiesel, who was here before, who was a wrestling guy, turned himself into a volleyball coach and coached wrestling and volleyball for years. He used to ask me after games, he goes, well, why'd you do this? Or why'd you do that? Because he was interested, but he really had no idea. And he would tell me, because I don't know anything about basketball, but that's not his job, right? I don't know anything about soccer. My job is not to coach a soccer team. My job is to find good people. And that's really what I've tried to do. And I think that's what Pat Kennedy taught me. That's what Coach Wood taught me. They just tried to find good people to be around them. And then hopefully they know something about the sport, right? But if you find good people, even if they don't know something, you can help them. You can coach them and help them move them along. But really, that to me was probably one of the fundamental things just about life in general, right? Especially in the culture we're in right now, where everything's so adversarial that we're just trying to get along with people. And I think that was probably the key thing from Coach Kennedy was, just adapt to what they're doing. Talk to them, listen to them. Rich talked about that a couple of weeks ago with you. Coach Becerra probably taught me at high school at a young age, and he used to tell us this: I'll play anybody anytime. And it wasn't about winning or losing. It was just, we're not going to be afraid of anybody. We're going to compete. Whether we're a Division I school or a Division V, we're just going to go compete. And whatever happens, happens. And that to me kind of laid the groundwork for just continue to move on. I never really wanted to get a real job, so I kind of kept going to school. And it made everybody happy around me. But realistically, it was like, I'm just going to keep getting another degree. And I've had people say, oh, you must be really smart. I was like, no, I just didn't stop. It has nothing to do with being smart. I just was able to continue to keep going. I didn't quit, right? And I think that's probably the other thing that I've learned and instill is just keep moving forward. That's, Walt Disney used to say, just keep moving forward, just keep moving forward. And that, I think that's what I've learned from a lot of different people along the way.
Well, I like the advice from Coach Kennedy, right? Which is, I would say goes counter to what most programs do, right? You have the top down marrying of programs, and he still provided for that, right? Here's the 15 terms. Here are the things that they need to know. But as a system, you got to figure out what fits the kids you have, right? Now, at a high school level, you can't recruit to that in most places. And at the college, you can recruit to your system, but hey, look at what you have, figure out what's going to make them most successful. Just make sure you teach these core concepts so that they don't lose anything when they transition to me. I really love that.
Absolutely.
Thanks for sharing.
Even the college recruiting, people say they can, like Syracuse can recruit to their zone, right? Because they're Syracuse. But most college programs are not recruiting. Like they want to find people that work in their program. But if they find somebody who's still really good, they're not going to be like, well, you don't really fit our program. I know you hit 10 threes a game, but you don't. No, they're going to take that kid and they're going to figure it out. And that to me is probably the piece that's missing in youth sports is people think I need to get them on this AAU team. I need to get them on this club team. No, just develop their skills. Correct. Develop the fundamental skills in an early age and they'll figure it out. They'll grow into their body and they'll be ready. And if I was a varsity high school coach anywhere in America, I would be creating a K through 8th grade socialist athletic, section where everyone's playing all the time, everyone's involved because you don't want to lose anybody. Maybe, I don't know, depending on what school people are at, there's always that 6'4" kid that walks on campus as a freshman first day, and everybody's going, "Who are you?"
Mhm.
He's like, "Oh, I'm so and so. I grew 6 inches over the summer."
Mhm.
Well, you want to play football? No, I played 3 years ago and I hated it. They were mean, and it did, whatever the reason is, they stopped and they grew into this body. We've
Mhm.
got to cultivate everybody in that K through 8th grade group.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I was kind of an outlier when I was coaching youth softball because I used to use this rotational batting order, and wherever we made the last out, the next game, that's where the order started. And
That
people
is
looked at me
that
sideways.
is that is awesome. And if you probably tried to do that with some programs now, people would go absolutely crazy. Parents would lose their mind.
Yeah.
But you're absolutely right. You play 40 games and your top 4 hitters are getting 40 more at bats than anybody else.
Mhm.
That's not the whole group. But if you want to win, you better play my son. He better bat first or something. I love that idea. That's a great idea.
Yeah, I was able to steal that from our softball coach here, actually, and it was really good for us over the years, and allowed all of our kids to have equal opportunity, at least on Saturdays, before you get into bracket play on Sunday. But
Sure.
it's just good to have different options, right? And I liked what you said too about the former AD asking you questions about basketball, and I think it's the importance that I see in that is you didn't take that defensively. Like, what do you mean? Like trying to protect yourself. He was genuinely curious. And I would think most of us as administrators are curious because we're trying to grow and asking our coaches because that's the example we have to point to.
Yes, absolutely. And that's part of what I learned from him, even now doing it, is I have to ask those questions. Sometimes it is because I want to find out, like, hey, what happened? Like, I am trying to help them and coach them along. But the most time, you're absolutely right. It's just trying to be, I'm trying to understand, and I want them to know that I do care about what they're doing. So I'm engaged. I want to understand. It's like asking your spouse, how was your day? What did you do today? It's the same thing with the team and with the coaches, is just trying to engage with them to know what's going on. And now it might spark something in them too, to question, well, yeah, why did I do that? Maybe I should go back and look at it. And but how you approach that, right? Your tone of voice,
Mhm.
when do you do it? Do you do it immediately after a game, and challenge somebody? You do it, they just lost 1-0 on the soccer field.
Yep.
You probably don't approach them right then and there about it, but you have a conversation later with them. That's again, building that relationship with people.
Yeah, and I think I've learned that more in the last 5 years with our president, who is one of the smartest people I've ever been around. And you go into the office and he's asking these questions, and you come out just like, oh my God, you feel like an idiot. But if you can put your defensiveness aside and realize that there's all these nuggets that were just offered to you just out of curiosity that you had never thought about, the world opens. And it was something that I learned really quickly and have been able to grow as a professional and as a leader and as a coach, just by being willing to analyze the why of the decisions versus getting attached to the outcome per se.
Yeah.
And it's funny, and this is going a little bit sideways, but Annie Duke, right, famous poker player, wrote this book called Thinking in Bets. And she said, most of us evaluate our decision making based on the outcome versus looking at the decision that was made regardless of outcome. And it really jades your future decision making. So you have to retrain yourself to look at the decision without taking the outcome into consideration, because that's a byproduct of your decision making.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's everything we do on a daily basis, right? We know what our core values are, what we want to do personally and professionally. We can't let something even like the pandemic, right?
Mhm.
Where, you never let a good crisis go unused, right?
Mhm.
We don't need to make rash decisions. We need to actually be calm, stay the course, just be patient with what we're doing, and let things play out a little bit. Because a lot of things we're doing right now, we don't even have control over. We can't make decisions on what we're going to do 6 months from now, because we don't even know what the world's going to look like 6 days from now.
Absolutely.
So we just kind of have to be patient and relax a little bit. And sometimes, it's easier said than done, because you want to make decisions and do things, but we have to be patient.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about observation. And as I transitioned into the role of the athletic director, and I've said this on some other episodes, but the pool is right outside my window. I get to watch water polo and swimming practice all year round. And I find myself really digging in and asking questions and then trying to steal that stuff to my role as the basketball coach. And I'm wandering around the sideline harassing my football coaches, just asking a ton of questions. And, they probably feel like, just get out of here, go back in the stands. And it's like, what have you learned both as an athletic director and as an assistant coach or watching other sports that you've been able to apply to your primary sport or offer as a suggestion to the coaches that you're mentoring that may or may not have to do with that particular sport?
Well, I think there's probably two things. One's tactical, fundamental, and one's probably more psychological or emotional, right? Tactically, I think sports, the majority of sports in the United States they're more offensive driven, right? Probably when we were in high school, we spent most of our time playing D, and coaches talking about D. It wasn't about shooting the three and scoring 80, 90 points a game. Now it's more offensive structured, and it's about spacing. Mm-hmm. So it's fundamental skill development into spacing. And that's where, I talked about just fundamentally developing kids, mm-hmm. K through 8th grade. That's more important than teaching them plays. Mm-hmm. And that, teach them how to play as opposed to teaching them plays. And I've coached my oldest son in basketball, and I've had other people ask me, well, what plays are we going to run? I said, we're not going to run anything. They can't remember any plays, and most of them can't dribble, pass, or shoot. So we're going to work on dribbling, passing, and shooting. And we've ran out of bounds plays where the other coach, that was a great out of bounds play. What was that? I go, it wasn't anything. I told one kid to bring it in, and everyone else just move, go away and come back. And oh yeah. So I think that's part of it is I've learned over the years that there's got to be that individual skill development for everybody. And I watched one of Chip Kelly's practices at Oregon a couple of years ago, and they do 12-minute increments, 4, 4, and 4, 4 minutes individual, 4 minutes small group, and 4 minutes live 11 on 11. And it really made me think about, well, I have to structure my practices so that each player gets better, not just the whole team. So we're not going to sit and run 30 plays for 4 hours. We're going to each get better individually. Mm-hmm. Now, I think that ties into the psychological side of it, that everyone is a part of what you're doing. Right. It's really hard to keep a kid who's the 12th person down the bench engaged in what you're doing. But that person needs to know, like, hey, we can't do this without you. I need you in practice every day, helping everybody get better. Mm-hmm. No one else may see it. Mom and dad doesn't see it. The newspaper isn't going to see it, but I see it. Mm-hmm. And that's what's cool about hockey. If you know anything about hockey, you get half of an assist when somebody scores. If I pass it to you and you pass it to somebody else. Mm-hmm. Well, the guy that sets a screen in basketball and the other kid scores or gets the back door, nobody sees that. Right. The extra pass that led to the pass, that person doesn't get an assist. Mm-hmm. And I think sometimes, you talk about self-awareness and trying to just be engaged in what's going on. You really have to think about that and see all of those moving parts, right? Mm-hmm. And you have to make sure all of those people are engaged and they understand what their part is. And it's the same thing at the administrative level. The basketball program gets people that come in because it's the middle of the winter and a lot of people come and watch. Well, the baseball team on the Southern Oregon coast, they don't get as many people coming to watch it. It's cold, it's usually windy, but they're not any less important than what we're doing for the basketball team. So I think those are probably the two things, trying to get people to understand that they're important. Yeah. And value, a lot of times people place value on money, right? So if you give me more money, then you must think I'm more valuable. Well, I'm sorry, but we're in education, right? Nobody's getting paid nearly what they should be getting paid. And that's not how we value you. So I think as adults and parents and coaches, we need to make sure that our kids, our athletes understand that they're valued to us. And it doesn't matter if they're the starter or if they're playing trombone, or if they're a dancer or in the theater. I think that's probably one of the biggest things I try and tell parents is, just because your kid is not a good athlete doesn't mean you're not a good parent. And I don't know if parents have ever heard that before, right? Because everyone thinks, well, my kid's a starter, I must be a good dad. It's like, no, that doesn't mean you're a good dad. You might be a lousy dad. Your kid might be a starter, you might be a lousy dad. Mm-hmm. Or your kid's the worst, but you might be a great parent. It's not a direct correlation. I think parents need to understand that. And the same is probably for coaching. If your team loses the game, that doesn't mean you're an awful coach. It means you lost a game. Somebody missed a shot. Maybe you did call the wrong play. But, we talked about that before. I don't know how many youth sports games you've ever been to that you probably didn't watch warmups and you knew, okay, this team's going to win. Mm-hmm. I've coached my son at the hoop in Salem. We walked in the gym. I looked at the other dad. I go, we are in trouble. Like, this team is going to kill us. And we lost all 3 games. Like, yeah, but it's still a great experience. It doesn't mean you turn around and leave, but you usually know, if I go back and was honest about the games I coached here at the college as the women's coach, there were some games I knew, okay, we're going to win this game. There's nothing, we don't have to do anything. This team is really bad. There's other games I'm looking going, we have no chance. And that to me is like, you still go do it, right? You still compete. You still, you still have that challenge. It's fun to go do it. So I don't know. I kind of went off a tangent there, but that to me, probably the 2 things is just trying to be self-aware and trying to understand other people's perspectives and listen to people.
Yep. Well, I think that probably speaks to how your approach to coaching has shifted over the years as well. How would you point to what would be a tangible share of what has changed from when you first got into it in whatever role to now? What are you prioritizing versus what were you prioritizing then?
I remember losing my voice coaching JV basketball at Santa Rosa as a junior in college. I think it's 20 or 21 years old. And we'd all make fun of each other. Oh, you lost your voice. You must have just started practice. Well, as I got older, I never lost my voice because you don't need to yell and scream. So I think I am a pretty intense individual at times. And if I get going on something and somebody wants to talk, I love to have it. But I don't waste that energy anymore on the yelling and the screaming. It's just it's not worth it. And coaching women for so long, my former AD again, he used to tell me, he goes, listen, if an 18-year-old young woman needs a grown man to yell at them to do something the right way, there's something wrong all the way around. You shouldn't have to yell at somebody, because you're telling them the 3rd or 4th time to do something. There's an issue. Maybe you're not saying it the right way. Maybe you need to go a different direction in teaching. But it's a collective problem. If you tell somebody to do something and they don't do it right, it's not just because, oh, I just decided to do it wrong. I don't want to do it right. No, there's a disconnect in that learning, right? If your entire class fails a test, it's probably your fault as a teacher. There's something wrong with the test, or you didn't teach them what they needed to know before they took that test. So there has to be a little bit of collective responsibility in that failure sometimes, that I think we just need to be aware of as adults and as leaders and supervisors or whatever we're doing, that if somebody fails, maybe we're part of the problem. We need to figure out a way to help them to get what they need.
Right. It's what's the role that you played in this situation versus what did they do wrong?
Yep.
A shift in maturity over time. And I think Urban Meyer said on a podcast I was listening to a little while ago that was like, if what you're teaching isn't showing up on the film, you need to look at your teaching.
Yes.
And that's not usually where we go when we're younger and just getting into this. Very few of us have the emotional maturity or self-awareness to do that.
Yeah, that's self-awareness. And that's the thing, you're 18, 19 years old. You think you know everything. And now that's what I try, and at 44, I try and tell kids, athletes that come in and we talk, is like, listen, here's the first thing that needs to happen. You need to think to yourself, and you need to understand that you have no idea what you're talking about. You really don't. You really don't. Or if you do, it's such a smaller piece than what I know, because I'm telling you what I know is way more than you, just because of the sheer fact that I've been alive twice as long as you.
Right.
So just come in with that open mind that you have no idea what you're talking about. And that's the same thing that I try and do when I talk to a coach who's coaching a sport I don't know, or even a coach that is coaching a sport I know, like, hey, what were you thinking here? I have to come in with that open mind that I have no idea what I'm talking about either. Let me learn from what you're telling me too.
Yeah, 100%. I love that approach and the curiosity as you try to move the needle and get a little bit better. So you started this, let's call it an organization, this group, this movement of supporting student athletes. What prompted that? And can you tell us a little bit about what niche you're trying to serve?
So I've been asked here locally to do some coaching clinics, and I'll go in and do a 30-minute to an hour coaching clinic on best practices and how to schedule a practice, how a practice plan, start on time, end on time. Parents hate it when
Mm-hmm.
coaches don't start and end on time, right?
Mm-hmm.
Well, through that, I've slowly alienated myself as a parent who won't sit with other parents.
Mm-hmm.
I just can't do it because the conversations and what's going on is not beneficial to the kids.
Mm-hmm.
And then so I was angry, for a little bit. Then I realized, wait a second, these are all really good people. They all think they're helping. Yelling from the sideline, yelling from behind the fence. Oh, keep your head up, keep your elbow here, shoot it, shoot it. They're all trying to help. There are good people, so I take a step back and go, these are good people who are trying to help. But I thought, I could probably help. So I started doing parent clinics. And I put together some information I've had over the years from the sports psychology classes that I've taught and taken, theory of coaching, sociology of sports, stuff like that. And I put together this, basically it's a 30-minute, real quick, easy parent clinic. And what I do is I promote it to high schools. Mm-hmm. And I say, hey, I want to come in the fall, winter, and spring, right before your season start. And I'm going to talk to your parents about, here are some tips and some tricks about what you can do to help your kid. Kind of like, for instance, when you get in the car on the ride home, don't talk about the game. Mm-hmm. Unless the child brings it up, you don't talk about it. You just tell them, hey, I loved watching you. That was great. It's fun watching you play, because that's honest. Mm-hmm. You can't tell your child, hey, that was a great game tonight. And they're going to look at you and go, Dad, I was, 2 for 15 and we lost by 25. That's not honest.
Right.
But you also don't need to say, oh man, you were 2 for 25. You were awful tonight. You don't do that either. So what I do is I just try and come in and talk to parents to try and change that culture so that they know, again, look, you don't have to yell and scream from the stands. That's not what a good parent is. I think some people think that is, but someone needs to educate them and say, look, your role is a parent. You're not a coach, you're not a referee, and you're definitely not an athlete anymore. Your role is to be a parent, and it's the best role. I don't want to be a coach. I want to sit in my chair in left field and enjoy my kids playing sports. And that's it. I don't want to be upset if they lose. I don't want to be too excited if they win. I just want to be there to care about them and enjoy that moment, because it's going to be over like that, right? It's fast and they're gone. So that's all I try and do with this website, with the Facebook page, is just to try and give some tips every couple of days, try and get people to think about what they're doing. That's the critical thinking, is thinking about our own thinking, that self-awareness. Like, oh, should I really be yelling and screaming at this referee right now? No, you shouldn't be, even if that referee was totally wrong. And as a coach, there probably aren't too many games that your kids played in, if you weren't coaching, that you probably knew more than that basketball coach that was coaching the game, right? But in the same situation, I'm going to sit there and be quiet. Yeah, absolutely. There's things I would do differently. There's all kinds of things I would do differently, but I've got to keep my mouth shut. I got to let my child have that experience, and my child needs to learn to listen to an authority figure. They should not learn to look at me and then the authority figure. That triangle of communication has to be clear, and they need to know, well, Dad, I can't believe coach did this. Well, you should talk to your coach about it. That's none of my business. Go talk to him. Oh, really? Yeah. I'm sitting here. I'm dad. And I've coached my son where I got on him one day and we got in the car and he's upset. And I said, what's up? Well, you yelled at me. I said, no. Coach Herbert yelled at you. Your dad is in the car now. I turned it off. We're done. We're going home. What do you want to do? What's for dinner? Oh, he thought I was still mad at him. I was like, no, Coach Herbert was mad and Coach Herbert's still in the gym, but we're going home. So I think as a parent, that's what I'm trying to do, is trying to engage other parents to, one, understand that it's okay that your kid's not going D1 or whatever, and engage other parents just to try and help them be better parents and better support their kids. Because being a parent's hard, man. It's really hard. And I don't know if there's a whole lot of support for other parents to know that, hey, you're doing okay. And your kid's doing okay. Everything will be all right. So that's what I'm doing with the Facebook page. That's what I'm doing with trying to do the clinics for people. And now I'm trying to do them Zoom because I can't really go anywhere and I can't go into a high school. So I'm just trying to get in front of parents and talk to them.
Yeah. I think the nuggets there that are easy takeaways. One, role definition. What is your role in this situation, right? Are you Coach Herbert? Are you dad? Are you so-and-so's parent sitting in the stands? And with that role, what is your job? You know, I often ask my athletes when they start getting in the mode of, let's say, complaining. It's like, look, you want to play, you want to ref, or you want to coach. Those are your three options. Choose. You can't do all three.
Nope.
And what? Yeah, pick and decide, and we'll set that up for you. Oh, okay. And that usually gets them back in line. And it's a little bit abrasive and direct, but it helps identify, hey, this is what we're here to do. And I think, you know, the other thing that you mentioned is earlier in the conversation, just because your kid isn't necessarily a great athlete doesn't mean you're a bad parent, because they're not necessarily getting the reinforcement about all the other wonderful things that their child does. And when they present to everyone else, you know, for the most part, these kids are awesome kids, and the ones that struggle, they're just looking for some help, you know, to deal with whatever they're carrying. And so one of my mentors said to me the other day, and he's a very accomplished coach, and he would go watch his kids play, and all these parents would inevitably come sit next to him and be like, what are these coaches doing? And he's just like, I think Mike Herbert's the best coach in America. And they would just stop, and that would be the end of it. And they'd never come to him again. And he's like, he said every year once that would happen. And what it did is it separated that idea that we think we know more. And it's like, this is this guy that does have all the answers, and he's deflecting to no, this is what he's doing. And when his kid made a comment, he did the same thing you did. That's a conversation you need to have with coach. That's not something that we're going to deal with at home. And I think that's really good information to share.
Well, that's the staying in your lane, right? And athletics is one of those places that everybody, well, I'm the armchair quarterback, and I got a guy here locally who I've become good friends with. Our kids are friends, and he's coached my son. And I tell him all the time that he's in tire sales. And I'm like, and brakes and all, I go to you, you're the expert on that. Like, I'm not going to change my own tire or do my own brakes because I don't know anything about it. I know what I don't know, and I'm going to go find the expert. But in athletics, we tend to think, well, we're going to go, I know this. I know what's going on because I played 30 years ago. It's like, even if you did, you have to teach your kid that they should listen to that authority. They should listen to that person who's in that position for that time. That's the important piece that I think we need to educate our kids on. That's what that your mentor does right off the bat. And he's super secure in who he is. He doesn't need to know. This is the guy. Listen to this guy. He's in charge. This is the way to do it. And I think with that, like you mentioned, with some parents haven't been told how their kids are doing well. They aren't encouraged if they're not, you know, the best player or whatever. And I think that, I don't want to get too deep, but, you know, with our social media and the problems with kids posting things and having to keep up with posting things, we've seen a huge increase in kids' suicides and attempted suicides, especially in the last 8 months of COVID. And some of that is due to the fact that, well, if my kid didn't do something right, well, I have to post a picture of them doing this great thing and they got this trophy and do it. And it's like, whoa, we got to take a step back here, everybody. Like, we're growing young adults here, and we have to be really careful in the pressure and the stress that we put on them, because they are at a more stressful and more difficult time in their life than ever, and everything's out publicly. It wasn't like that for you and me. But as a parent, I got to be real careful to praise every single little tiny thing that my kid does. That's what they're supposed to be doing. They should be making their bed and doing these things, but we have to be real careful. I think coaches, adults have to be real careful because those statistics are taking off. Our NCAA numbers, collegiate athletes with suicide rates are astronomical in the last year or two. And that is directly related to the pressure that we're putting on our kids to, you know, we joked, I showed my shirt, to play up, to be the star, to be on this team and do this stuff and get the scholarship. And I think we need to relax a little bit and just give them a break. We need to give our kids a little bit of a break.
One of the smartest things I've heard lately, and it was totally random on my bike ride yesterday, was listening to the guy that founded the program that I told you about, Eric Kapitulik, and he was talking about how his son is going to these obstacle courses, and each level that he's able to complete, and he would sit there and film it, and he was telling the story about, well, he missed the next ledge, and so he's like, all right, let me delete that one, and he would wait until he got it, and he realized, he's like, whoa, if I'm only keeping the successes, it's teaching him the wrong thing, which is your life is this highlight film where it's not. It's the failures are what are allowing you to grow and to figure out what you need to do. And often in today's society, we don't document those. We forget about those. We don't talk through those. We dismiss those, where you're going to fail so much more often than you find success. How do we celebrate that failure so that it's normalized?
Well, I think part of it is reminding parents that they fail all the time. Yeah. And trying to understand, and I tell people all the time, I'm not a trophy for everybody guy. I talk about K through 8, fundamental development, no trophies, no champion. I don't care about any of that. And people will look at me and go, oh, you don't want to compete? Like, no, I'm going to compete every single moment of every single day. But it doesn't mean I get a trophy if I win, or I'm going to get publicly shamed if I lose. So I think trying to normalize it and let people know that it's okay to fail is a first step in that direction, without being shamed into, well, you're a loser because you lost. I think we have to continue to show kids early on that it's okay to lose. I think when your kid forgets his lunch and you don't run back home to get it for them and save them, and they figure out how to eat for the day, that's a very small little thing. Like, well, you forgot it. Like, I'm not mad at you about it, but figure it out, man. Suffer the consequences. I know a family locally that their kid was so focused on getting A's that they thought they was stressing their child out. They told their child, we're going to give you $100 if you get a B. We just want you to get a B, because you need to understand that it's not a big deal. You're like in the 7th grade, just get a B. Who cares? So I think part of it is us being okay with that failure, and having these conversations, I think is really important to understand and try and build that next generation, because this next generation is the most aware group of individuals ever, right? I mean, they're aware of social, gender, everything, political issues. We have to let them know that, I think for us as adults, we can't lose our minds. Coach Wood used to say, things are never quite as good as they seem, and they're never quite as bad as they seem. So if your child screws up, if your team loses, you can't lose your mind. It's one game, it's one at bat. Yeah. Just relax and let's move on. We've tried to deal with our youngest, who has a more difficult time with baseball when he strikes out, but we've tried to talk to him about, look, I'm not worried about the strikeout. What? No, I'm worried about how you react to the strikeout. And I think just having these conversations with people and trying to educate parents on that, it's okay that your child fails. It's okay that, it didn't work out this time. You didn't get a lot of the best jobs I didn't get the first time around. They worked out pretty good. I would have never met my wife at Humboldt if I would have got the grad assistant job the first time. I waited 2 years and I got it again, and we met. So things work out for a reason sometimes.
100%. And I think 2 things on that note. One, the mistakes are important, but your mistake response is what's really important. And the how do you learn to deal with them and make them a positive? And 2, what you just said, I say this to people all the time. Sometimes our best decisions are made by other people, and it opens doors that you didn't know were there. And we need to keep that in mind, feel the disappointment, and understand that there's another opportunity.
Yeah.
Years of doing this, variety of different places, observing other sports. You got a lot of tools in the toolbox now. If we could go back in time, since we're essentially the same age, get in the DeLorean and go back to when you were first starting, what advice would you offer your younger self?
I think the first one would be back to what I tell those freshmen now. You don't know anything. And I think I thought I knew everything. I I had a really bad goatee one summer, and Trent Johnson at Stanford at the time, I said, what do I got to do to be a Division I head coach? He said, first thing is you need to shave that thing off your chin. It looks awful. So I would tell myself to be open to those types of things, and probably engage more with some of those older coaches, personally and professionally, just to learn from them. I think that would be number one, is to tell myself, you don't know anything. I thought I had it all figured out. My life has been pretty easy. My mom was great, had things set up for me. You know, I took advantage of all those opportunities, but I would tell myself to slow down, pay attention to what's going on around you a little bit more, and talk to those older coaches, whether you were playing against them or working with them or whatever you were doing. I would tell myself to do that. And I would probably tell myself, you're going to end up somewhere that is going to be the right place, but right now you have no idea what that right place is, because we don't, right? We all think we know, we have it planned out, but you end up, I mean, I never would have thought I'd be living in, you know, Coos Bay, working at a community college. And now that I'm here, I'm like, where else would I be? I couldn't imagine myself anywhere else. So I think that, you know, you don't know what you don't know. And at that point in my life, I thought I knew a whole lot. I thought I had things figured out. So I would tell myself, hey, relax, be patient. Things will work out the right way. You'll end up where you're supposed to end up. Because it's, you know, yeah, you think you know everything and you don't. So,
well, I think your answer is so good, because it's speaking to two different avenues of the, nobody knows what the future is going to bring. Try to be in the present and live every moment as an opportunity for greatness, and lean into that and maximize the time that we do have. And I think nothing has been more indicative of that than old COVID. And how do you find the COVID wins around you? They're there if you look for them, and you can reconcile the fact that it's not a controllable, but there are things that are in your control, and how you respond to the circumstances you did not create. And that's something I tell my children. You're 100% responsibility for how you respond to circumstances you did not create. What are you going to do to make the moment a win for you?
yeah.
So I really appreciate having you on. I'd like to provide an opportunity for people to find you and supporting student athletes if they want to dig into that. So where can people find you, Coach?
You can just search it on Facebook. It's Supporting Student Athletes. Like the page. I've got my own Facebook page, Mike Herbert. You can friend me and connect with me there. Instant message me if you're interested in me, you know, meeting with your schools or your parents and doing Zoom stuff online. I'm more than willing to do that stuff. At this point, I don't charge for any of that. So I'm more than willing to meet with you and talk to other ADs or parent groups, you know, that are interested in me doing that kind of stuff. I'm more than available to do that.
Awesome. Well, I appreciate the service that you're providing and the time you're taking to share your years of wisdom with us. And I look forward to talking more in the future.
Thanks, Justin. I really appreciate the time. I'm honored to have me on here today. Thanks.
Absolutely.